Standing up in McKinney. This is, according to Callus, episode 705. I know, it's been a bit. The last recorded episode that I have, literally I did 5 episodes the entire month for October 8th to November 8th. All December off. You know, folks, I'm going to give you an abbreviated tale of woe. 2024 was not my best year. Not in the least. Notwithstanding the outcome, tough year. I talked a little bit about it. I don't want to dwell on it, but we're just going to do a brief update. So my wife and I had tag team emergency surgeries the month of January of 2024. Then in April 2024, there was an incident that I was a party to that the other party has chosen to make this into a far bigger deal than he ought to, in my opinion. Enough so that it's beyond the pale. We'll just leave it at that. Those of you that know me in real life know exactly what I'm talking about, and you probably even know who I'm talking about. I'm not looking to spend any more time on it only because it doesn't serve anybody's purposes, good purposes at this point. So we'll just leave well enough alone. Then October 1st, my long-term employer and I parted ways. It was a rough year for them as well, and it just so happened that my turn to separate. Not fun. Certainly understood the reasoning. I understood the rationale. You have to protect the company. No hard feelings. I say that. It's not 100% dead on accurate, but I have no ill will. Let's put it that way. And, I knew that I had 6 weeks. I had until mid-November. And if I didn't, or if I wasn't successful, I was looking at the first of the year before I was going to get any traction. So it's after the first of the year, still sorting things out. I wish I could tell you it's been positive, not so much. It also came to a boiling point where the church that I invested the lion's share of my life into had deviated far enough from what I was comfortable with, what my wife and I were comfortable with, that we needed to part ways. I talked a little bit about that. I want to be very careful. I don't think there's anything heretical. I don't think there's anything that's antichrist, right? And if you know what I mean by that, that's probably the easiest way I can phrase it. I will say heterodox comes to mind. I will say reimagining or always reforming come to mind. Now that I'm no longer a member and I'm no longer attending, I may choose to speak a little bit more about what was going on and how that relates to where I am now. It's just going to be where the Spirit leads me, because I don't want to beat a dead horse. But on the flip side, I think it's important to know these things, because this has been a significant current in place since at least 2020. Now, it's very easy to blame St. Floyd, but he was just a symptom, right? There were lots of other things going on, other undercurrents that brought about where we're at now. And I've always tried to be deferential, particularly in church matters, because there are different ways to interpret or understand certain things. And there's a lot of what they call secondary issues. And as long as we agree on primary issues, we're all good. But it becomes a point where you start deviating or ignoring enough secondary issues that it becomes a primary issue. And then the electoral situation, right? So this is kind of a recap of last year, kind of bringing you all up to speed in the life of Callus. The election outcome was better than I imagined, on paper. And I want to be real careful with how I say this, because I've always said that I'm a Christian Texian. I have difficulty with people that embrace terms without fully understanding what's going on there just because it annoys the right people. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like annoying those same people, but I think you need to be a little more careful. And to that end, while I'm grateful that some of these folks have gotten involved and decided to get on the Trump train, if you will, I'm not certain they have America first in mind. I'm not certain that, well, I know they don't have Texas first in mind. To the extent that they're good allies or they're helpful, well, sure, okay, fine. And we won, right? And that was the most important thing, right? We won. But if you're sacrificing all of your principles in order to win, did you really win? Are you getting what you wanted if you've done that? And that's kind of one of the bigger challenges, because I believe compromise. I believe that getting what you can get is very important. But again, there's limits. And I'm just not sure that the conservatives, which again have failed to conserve anything, are going to be happy with the outcome here. So, again, the other thing that I find very, very interesting is this constant use of the term Nazi. Oh, probably get demonetized for saying that, but the National Socialist Party, right? That's what was going on there. And if we separate out their preoccupation with Jews and other racial stuff, they're not too far off from what the actual Soviets or socialists themselves were doing. And before we get too far along, yeah, there was fascists in many other nations beforehand that were aligned, but again, didn't have that icky racial stuff in there, right? So when I look at that and I see that we're still throwing this around like it's a bomb, and unfortunately it has no effect. The people on the right generally laugh at this now or roll their eyes, and the people on the left just bleed even louder that this is the case, and nobody's really paying attention. The normies out there, right? People that don't spend all this time invested in political hijinks or theory or anything like that, they're immune to it. They hear it so often. Now, we on the right, when we criticize each other from the right and we bring up communist, that still holds water. That still gets people upset, or socialist, if you will, because we don't use it as a common tactic. It's not used on every insult, right? Just keep that in mind and use that as a frame of mind going forward. Because one of the greatest fears we had when Bill Clinton was president was a North American Union. Yet, our president-elect has been openly calling for a North American Union. oh yeah, we're going to make Canada a state, or we're going to annex Greenland. I mean, look, it sounds fun, and it's kind of antagonistic to the right people. But I'm not sure that people ought to be all that excited about a North American Union. And if you thought that we weren't able to conserve anything before, what do you think is going to happen when we add another, what do they got? 40 million people maybe in Canada, and 25 or 30 million of them are crazy leftists? Okay, maybe that's not fair. Let's just say significantly left of center. Do you think that's a net positive for these United States or not? In Greenland, I mean, I don't think there's any more people there than what is currently in Vermont. It's a great big chunk of land with a lot of natural resources. So, I mean, that's good. But again, we were very concerned about a North American Union, and our president-elect is basically talking about that very thing, and a good number of people are awfully excited about this. My question is, should they be? All right, so that's my recap. Look, I've taken up 2/3, or I've taken up 1/3 of my show, which I am going to entitle Dawn in America, with a question mark. So as you may know, I'm a big fan of the movie Red Dawn. And it just so happens that this last year was the 40th anniversary of that movie. Came out in 1984, it was 2024. So as I watched the movie, because I try and watch it once a year, and I finished it today. The other thing that directly correlates with this is the book series Blue Dawn. And I spent some time talking about that over this last year as well. And there's a little compare and contrast going on there. But I wanted to talk a little bit about both of those and how they relate. I'm going to try and stay cognizant of my time. I don't want to exceed about 35 minutes here, so bear with me, folks. Okay, so Red Dawn. The premise is pretty simple. Things got bad enough that the socialist communists decided that they were going to take the United States by conquest. They were going to take North America. They were largely successful initially because they had flooded people across the southern border. Now, this specific movie takes place in Colorado, where they had dropped in paratroopers to take the passes in the Rockies. Keep in mind, that would be a transportation choke point, right? So now, in this time off, I ran across a guy called the Fural Historian. He's on YouTube. Check him out. I recommend him. I've only seen probably a dozen different videos that he's done. One of the things he did is he did a compare of the original Red Dawn and the new Red Dawn. He made a couple of interesting observations that I hadn't put to words. So I want to give him credit to that. And I wish I knew the guy's actual name, but the Fural Historian. So he talked about the notion in the first movie as they were still Americans, right? They we can do this, the can-do attitude, take it on yourself. And in the new Red Dawn, it was almost entirely dependent on government and government authority in order to fight back and hold the line. And when he said that, as soon as he said that, the pieces started clicking into place. He's right. The Red Dawn I grew up with, the 1984 version, it was essentially high school kids who had the benefit of at least one father that spent time raising his kids to know how to live in the woods and how to hunt. And those two boys took a little band of high school students out to the mountains to make a go of it. They did it independently, and they figured it out. And it was individual initiative, if you will, that got them there. They didn't have anybody from the government training them or showing them how to do things, and they weren't dependent upon various law enforcement or else. It was just strictly guys thrown into this terrible situation, and what are we going to do about it? Now, and yes, I know there were two ladies, and I'm not taking anything away from them. And as a matter of fact, if you should watch this guy's video, he does a really good job of explaining how there's a kind of a transformation that takes place when the two granddaughters get added to this group of young men fighting in the woods. But I'll save that for later. Or actually, go check out the Fuel Historian, and the Fuel Historian will tell you everything you need to know about that. In either case. So, the thing that I picked up on when I was watching it again today, and here, I want to say this. I don't know that Milanus put this in there, or if I'm reading too much into this stuff. But it is kind of just a fun movie in its own right. But one of the things that I observed is, aside from being pro-American, it's more pro-American people, right? It's we the people. And it is successful in tugging on the emotional heartstrings, well, at least for me, right? I'm not an overly emotive person, but when I watch this movie and I get to the scene where they're reprising against the behaviors of the Wolverines, they break out singing, "Oh, beautiful, poor, spacious skies." And it's immediately interrupted with machine gun fire. Now, in the context of that movie, I wouldn't say I teared up, but there was a little wellspring of emotion coming out of there. Now, typically, I only feel that way when I hear taps. And for some strange reason, the Proud to Be an American song, I blame Boot Camp for that one. But no, but seriously, there's this emotive underlying structure going on here. Now, I don't know if everybody else that's in Gen X that watched that movie has the same attachment or relationship with the movie that I do. But I remember in, 1986 or 87, there was a legitimate fear that the Soviets might win, that there might be an invasion. I mean, it was far-fetched. It wasn't super realistic, but in your teenage mind, that seed's planted there. And you think to yourself, well, what would I do? How could I do this? What would need to happen? How can I make the best impact? Right? These are all things that go through your mind. Now, again, it's very easy to blow this off as just a kind of pop fiction movie. And look, it's got a lot of good actors in it from the 80s, right? And for that alone, it's worth a watch. But spending time in it and kind of immersing yourself in what's going on there, the second takeaway that I had, now I have noticed this before, and it kind of really hit home, though, again, today, the main character on the Soviet invasion team, I always recall how he was writing this longing letter to his wife. Well, at least I believe it's his wife. And he just wants to go home. And to me, it was kind of giving a contrast, right? The demoralization that has come in because he was a revolutionary and he was always the one fighting back and, trying, in other words, he was the partisan. And now that the shoe's on the other foot, so to speak, he realizes it's not what it was cracked up to be. And he begins to realize that maybe now he's become the oppressor. And maybe it's guilt, or maybe it's just pure loneliness, or some combination thereof. He talks about being in the warmth of the sun when he's in the Colorado Rockies in the winter. I mean, I got to tell you, if I was in the Colorado Rockies in the winter, I'd probably be thinking about the warm summer too. But again, it also shows through that scene that they didn't have to win. They just had to force the other people to break. By that I mean the partisans. And we have observed this throughout history, right? Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires. Look no further than that. You could say the same for Vietnam. Most people don't realize this, but China invaded Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken, at least twice. They were never able to successfully take over Vietnam. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, the Mongols invaded Vietnam, and they weren't able to successfully take it either. The only other group of people that successfully defeated and chased out the Mongols was an Egyptian foreign ruler. It wasn't even the Egyptians. I forgot what it was, but it was a group of nomads or whatever that were in Egypt, and they were able to do it. I think it's because they were on horseback as well. Again, there's a lot of stuff in my head from all the history books and classes and videos and such. So, look, let me just pause here real quick. As always, the show is named According to Callus because it's according to me. It's my opinion and my understanding. So I highly encourage you, take the time. Go do your own research. Double check me. Feel free to catch me if you can, if you will. I don't generally get things wrong. I might miss a detail or I might transpose a number or something. But when I'm doing these things, I pretty accurate. I don't stop to do the individual research beforehand because what fun would that be? And again, I'm not here teaching a class. I'm not here looking to educate you for some test or whatever else. I'm getting you to think. I'm getting you to question what it is you're seeing. That's what my goal is. That's why I talk about the things that I talk about. So again, back to the situation here. So the character from the invaders ends up not wanting to fight anymore. He's demoralized. Now, some people have talked about the fact that Milanus was kind of reacting to the Vietnam War in this movie. And I think that's pretty evident that there's some of that in there. Certainly with some of the influence in the way that the characters are written, especially on the occupation side. Okay. I think that's enough on the Red Dawn. So let's kick over to Blue Dawn. Now, Blue Dawn, I think, is a 5-book series. Blaine Pardoe is the author. This series postulates that there won't have to be a foreign invasion, that the United States falls and is successfully taken over from the inside. Now, Red Dawn mentions that there were infiltrators that came across the southern border. Blue Dawn basically comes up with the idea, those people were welcomed in. They were here. They, mixed in with everybody else, including the indoctrination camps known as government schools or public education. And that an entire generation or two, plus these infiltrators, successfully just won. They won at the ballot box. They sold their ideas. And then when they finally got in power, they tipped their hand. They showed exactly what they were up to and what they wanted to do. In fact, they were the very people that they accused the right of being all along. That is totalitarian. And as it plays out, the characters have to find a way to successfully push back and take back the government, if you will. Now, my libertarian background on this struggles with the notion that you can't do these things apart from government. That's one of the things that I think Red Dawn does well. It shows that that resistance is possible without government intervention or leadership. But Blue Dawn deals with an entirely different animal in that our own government was turned against us. And there were factions within the government that actually weren't on board with what was going on. And they were their own sleeper agents, and they were waiting and biding their time to fight back. When you've got the entire apparatus of the United States government and all the 3-letter agencies and the snoop and spyware and the military, or certain sections of the military, at your beck and call to stomp out and root out anybody that opposes you, yeah, you're going to need some elements of government to help you fight back. I'm sorry. As much as I don't like it, and it's kind of, messes with the vision, if you will, there's a certain amount of reality there. And Blue Dawn, again, deals with the idea that they didn't have to forcibly do anything. They co-opted generations of young people. They brought them up wanting to put the handcuffs on, wanting to oppress themselves, wanting to do these certain things, whatever they were, because I don't want to get into specifics. They wanted to punish themselves for their success. It was guilt. No, you shouldn't have a car. No, you shouldn't be able to have firearms. No, you shouldn't have these rights that were enshrined by our Constitution. They turned the whole thing on its head. Now, again, both of these are strictly fictional, right? They're different ideas of what could happen. But Blue Dawn, again, is driven by individuals that had quote-unquote government training, if you will, to a degree. Not all of them, but most of them. And they were separated out from that agency or the military, and they fought the good fight. And they did it, I would say, at least in part on their own. Entirely different scenario, but a similar outcome, right? And when you get to the end of the movie, Red Dawn, it remarks that it was a long time coming, but they finally got it back. And they were remembering the sacrifices of those young people. Now, when Blue Dawn ends, it doesn't have that same, I would call it, reminiscing, wistful thought process. It, in fact, kind of leaves off that, well, they won the battle, but the war wasn't over, right? I believe there's going to be a sequel series to this. And that's the other thing. And I guess this is really the major point that I'm trying to get at. Blue Dawn ends with a far more realistic ending as far as related to where we are at now. It's 2024, 40 years after the fact of when Red Dawn takes place, at least hypothetically, and the whole world's changed. People actually like to be subjugated. They like to be followed. They like to be protected. They like to be coddled. So if you want to talk about another comparison, it was at least feasible and plausible that 5 or 6 high school boys, right, young men going into the woods, would be able to take care of themselves, that they would be able to find a way to fight back, that they would be able to make a difference. I don't know that you could find, well, we'll just write off the millennials, but I'm not sure how many Gen Zs you could find, or even Gen Alphas, that would be willing to do that. Now, I'm hopeful they're there. I'm hopeful that they would have the skills or the knowledge or the desire to push back and fight and stand for what's important for them, which, again, is why I think Blue Dawn is all that much more relatable to today's day and age. They weren't interested. They actually enjoyed their chains. This is the very thing that we were warned about by the Founding Fathers, right? So, okay, just a couple final thoughts on this. I realize this is going to be an abrupt change of pace here to a degree. But when I'm talking about the two dawns, in Dawn in America, or Dawn of America, or however you want to phrase it, I spent some time last year talking about the idea of a negative world. I think to give proper credit, I think it's Aaron Renn. But the idea that there was a positive world, a neutral world, and now we're in a negative world. I don't think that's changed. I think it's very true that we are still in a negative world. But somebody else had postulated that even though it may be a negative world, it's also a world full of opportunity. It's a world where we can find those things because there is a crave, there's a need. People want truth. They desire things that they wouldn't otherwise desire because they're missing. Now, as a Christian, as somebody that, wants the positive here, right? I see that. I think to a degree that's always been the case. I think the difference is now, because we're in a negative world, it's pushing out all the posers. It's pushing out all the people that are only in halfway. It's forcing people to make a full commitment. Either you're fully in, like the guys in Red Dawn, or even the people in Blue Dawn. You're either fully in and embracing that you're in a battle, you're in a war, and this is what we must do to go forward and win. So to that end, it almost correlates to what went on in my own personal life. I left my church because I don't think they were fully in. I mean, they said the right things most of the time. They believe the right things. They just deviate on these other things that shouldn't matter, or so we're told. But to me, they're not fully in. You're not committed. You don't hold the line. Going back to the conservatives, right? They haven't conserved anything. And in many ways, the evangelical church isn't doing that either. And why do I say this, or what am I getting at? So, I'm not a Catholic. I was raised in a extended family Catholic environment, so I'm very familiar with Catholics. I have Catholic friends. I'm not hostile to Catholicism. I think they get a couple of things wrong, but I'm not going to, question their faith. I don't know where their eternal destination is of every one of those people. I'm not going to go down that path. But what I will say is, now I can't think of the guy's name. The guy on Daily Wire, there's like 4 of them since they've chased off the 2 ladies. Michael Knowles. He does reaction videos. And he was listening to a guy that claimed to be a pastor pontificate on the First Amendment and the separation of church and state. Now, Michael hammed it up for the video, which if honestly I was doing video, I would have done the same thing. This guy, I'm sorry, I don't know who he is from Adam, and he might be a smart guy, he might not be, but he is a poor pastor based upon this response, poorly educated based upon this response, and quite clearly has never read the First Amendment based upon his response. And he proceeded to muck everything up and tell us how grateful we should be that there's no church involvement in government. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, right? But he got it all wrong. I don't think he got any aspect of it right whatsoever. But he's a pastor, allegedly. An evangelical Christian pastor, allegedly. And these are the kinds of people that are being propped up. But now, in the negative world, I think they're also the same people that are being chased away, that are being knocked down, that are being shown to be frauds. And I'm kind of encouraged by that. Because, look, I'm a Christian. I believe certain things. I believe I know what objective truth is. I'm okay if you want to disagree with me. I'm okay if you want to deviate and do something else. I feel like it's well within my rights and my responsibility to tell you you're wrong. You're wrong because clearly this got bad consequences, or because the Bible says it's wrong. But I don't feel I should use force of government to come punish you or impel you to do any of that stuff, right? There's a huge difference there. Because the people on the left, when they get any bit of power, they feel like they should use government to force you to do things. And some of the people on the right have finally figured out trying to go neutral has not served us well. And the idea that we went so quickly from positive world to negative world because that neutral world was nothing but a little bump in the road tells the story. So when I say it's dawn in America, and I've referenced the idea of the red dawn or the blue dawn scenario, might I say we have to embrace the negative. We have to understand that in many respects we've lost the battle, but the war is not over. And if you're a Christian, like I would say I am, like I know I am, if we're on the same page here, you should be able to reflect on this and say, well, yeah, Stephen, you got a good point there. And there are lots of opportunities. We can make a go of this. We can make a difference. But you have to accept the world where you're at. You have to understand that we kind of did this to ourselves. But there is a way forward. So, in conclusion, it is dawn in America, but it's not the America I was born into. And if you're 30 years old, it's not the American you were born into. But it still claims to be America. And there's still enough Americana left that we can make a difference. We can be heard, and we can change things for the better. And I'll even set aside all the Texas talk for this moment. All right. So I'm back. I honestly don't know what to tell you. For right now, I'm going to set the bar low. I'm looking at 2 episodes a week. Don't know what day of the week. Just 2 episodes during the week. Going to try and shoot for 30 to 40 minutes each. As soon as I get my feet back on the ground and I get my life back in a positive monetary cash flow situation, I'll figure out how I'm going to make this work. The show is here for 2 people, me and you. Me, because it gives me an opportunity to vent and think about things and pontificate, if you will. And for you, I'm here to encourage you. I'm here to entice you to think for these things on your own, to come up with your own answers. It's never a requirement that you agree with me. It is a requirement that you can explain why you believe things that you believe and make a good argument for why you think that you are right. And with that, Happy New Year, and I'll be around. Looking forward to it. As they say, I will see you on the other side.